Hello there, folks. Okay, we're here today talking about Alex Salmond. Those of you who saw recently, I did a little video talking about how he was cleared of charges. He, had 14 counts brought against him. He was basically acquitted on all charges. All charges. So he's a very influential character. He's an member of the SNP. He was first minister during the time of the first independence referendum. And he has been a strong voice for Scotland for a very long time, as you're going to see in this video here today. So here he is with somebody you might all recognize, Miss Nicola Sturgeon, who is clearly one of the ones that learned a lot from Alex. It's these classy, and well-educated members of the SNP are all basically following an example set by Alex Salmond. And I'll use the word again. It's because Alex Salmond is such a classy guy, he is able to elicit this kind of, like loyalty, respect, and those sort of things. And it's just sad because these politicians that have to deal with Alex Salmond don't feel that they can beat him in a debate because they don't feel that they can argue as well and as effectively as he can. That the only route they had was to try and tar and feather him by trumping up a bunch of charges, which all fell flat in court. I mean, it was supposed to be a really long case. It was going to be a number of weeks and all these things, right? It ended up taking like just a week or two, and he was acquitted on all charges. I mean, what kind of evidence were they looking at when the Crown prosecutor decided to bring these charges? So when you look at the whole strange nature of it, it looks like an attempt to tar and feather somebody who they knew they couldn't beat in a debate. That's what it looks like and seems like. They obviously know the Yes Movement had a lot of faith in Alex Salmond, and if they would have been able to to make the villain of him that they tried to make him, that it would have hurt the independence movement. So an important thing to note is that Alex Salmond, a very long time ago, before the clip that you're about to see coming up, was actually like an economist with for the oil companies and stuff, and knew a lot about what was going on with the oil, the North Sea oil and stuff like that. So he was knowledgeable about that. I want you to know that before you see what's happening in this clip. This clip, you're going to see a very young Alex Salmond and a couple of older gentlemen. One is a Labour MP and one is a Tory MP. And they are having a discussion about Scottish independence and things like that. So, here we go.
Our first preference is a majority of SNP MPs and a quick procession, as quickly as possible at least, to an independent Scottish Parliament. That's what we're fighting for in the election. We're fighting for Scottish independence. Not for its own sake, although I'm prepared to argue for its own sake, but because we think that's the only way we can get the Scottish economy right. It's the only way we can get the Scottish economy back to full employment, is through an independent Scottish Parliament. Now, say we couldn't get an independent Scottish Parliament a week on Thursday, then our second preference is clearly for a hung Parliament. Why? Because that would be the situation where a group of SNP MPs could extract the maximum concessions for Scotland. By playing the Scottish card, we can win gains for Scotland, in the same way that we saw in the 1970s. In the late 80s, Scotland could once again rise to the top of the political agenda. That would be our second preference. But we may not get either of these things. And if we look seriously at the state of the opinion polls south of the border, and the clear Conservative lead, particularly in the south of Birmingham area where governments are elected, then the reality is that we all might face another term of the doomsday scenario, another term of Margaret Thatcher. Now, the question that the SNP is addressing, particularly to the Labour Party, because it's not really, well, it's certainly not worth addressing it to the Tories, because they're quite happy with the current situation in Scotland, where they lose elections but govern the country. Tories, because they're quite happy with the current situation in Scotland, where they lose elections but govern the country. And the Alliance, I don't really think, are in this calculation at all. But the question we are asking the Labour Party is, if we go into the doomsday scenario again, if, as seems likely, Scotland votes anti-Tory but we get another Tory government, what is the Labour Party going to do about it?
Yeah, what do you expect them to say?
Well, first of all, we're going to win this next election. We're going to win it in England as well as in Scotland. And with great respect, Mr. Salmond, the SNP has about as much chance of winning a majority in Scotland
as you have of winning majority in England.
Opening an oyster with a bus ticket. The SNP has about as much chance of winning a majority in Scotland
as you have of winning majority in England.
Opening an oyster with a bus ticket.
And what will you do about it if you don't win a majority?
We're going to win a majority in the United Kingdom.
Dennis, you were asked what the Labour Party would do in this so-called doomsday scenario where virtually all Labour MPs in Scotland and a Tory government in England.
Yeah, well, we shall fight to overturn that majority at the following election, and giving the economic circumstances... Oh, yes.
You'll do nothing. You'll do nothing as you've done since 1979.
We shan't sell out to the SNP, because I don't think the Scottish people, they've proved that in vote after vote, want independence from the rest of the United Kingdom. They don't want it. You've had your chance, you've failed.
So you're saying that you would rather see Margaret Thatcher govern Scotland from Westminster than even the Labour Party govern Scotland from an independent Scottish Parliament. That's your position.
I believe that to break up the United Kingdom in the way you suggest would be a recipe for disaster for the Scottish people. It might have sounded good when the oil was flowing and it was very high priced. Now the oil is running down, the price is falling.
All right, whoa, wait up, hold the phone there. He just said that Scotland's oil was running out back in 1987, right, is when that little clip is taking place, right? So let me just show you guys what's going on here in 1987. 1987 is right here, this line. The oil was coming down and eventually did do a bit of a downtake, but by 89, it's on the rise again. And by 92, it starts taking a real upshot. And in 2000 here, it's pretty much at a peak. So, yes, Scotland, if independent, could have been using that revenue to help its, new government that it had just formed, to help it, finance and do things until it gets on its feet. So the argument of the oil's running out, well, it isn't gone yet. So an independent Scotland or an independent Scottish government could use the revenue from that and things of that, the taxing of it and all those things. An independent Scottish government could use that until it does run out. All the while they're obviously making more renewable energies. They're, building on their renewables that they already have. Remember that Scotland is already bringing a third of the income from natural resources and natural resources to the table in the UK. They're about 8% of the population of the UK, but Scotland itself is bringing a third of the natural resources and the revenue created from them to the table in the UK. That's a very, very important stat for people to understand. So long as there is some oil, Scotland should become independent if you can. If Scotland can, while there's still some left, and the new Scottish government will be able to use that revenue and stuff to help them for a while. And like I said, ultimately they will they will invest more in their renewable infrastructure, and Scotland's really not going to be hurting in terms of natural resources and that sort of stuff. So anyways, all right, let's go back to it.
The SNP policy for Scotland is a policy for economic decay and political irrelevance.
So a couple things there that I thought were very interesting. Number one, Alex Salmond pointing out that the Tories like the situation the way it is because they can continue to lose elections in Scotland, but they can continue to govern the country. Well said. And then he gets into it with the Labour MP there, and first of all, the Labour MP, he constructs his question and asks it. Then the Labour MP basically starts talking all bravado about how he's going to win, Labour's going to win, this and that, and la la la. Doesn't answer the question. So then the Tory MP reminds the Labour MP of what the question was and that he didn't answer it. And, I mean, just watching that Labour MP was just amazing to watch him. But then he gets into talking about, he says, you had your chance in 79, and the people voted against it. Yeah, That's not really a real exactly true representation of what happened in 1979. What happened in 1979 is a referendum was held to decide whether or not Scotland would get a devolved parliament at the time. And the fact of the matter is that the vote went 60-40, something like that, in favor of a devolved parliament. But because a Westminster politician had at the last minute tacked on a piece, a new wrinkle into the document that or the wording of the documents or whatever about the referendum, to where it basically said that 60% of the people of Scotland, or 50% of the people of Scotland had to vote for it. Well, there was only like 60% voter turnout. So you realize that basically meant that the yes would have had to get a ridiculous percentage to be able to get in order to equal 50% of the population. So you can see how they move the goalposts in last minute on that. So it's not a really fair representation by the Labour MP there. That clip's an interesting clip. He also talks about how the SNP will never win a majority in Scotland, and on he goes, right? And and we now know what's going on in Scotland. They're not voting in Labour MPs there, as what's being done in that video clip we were showing, where the doomsday scenario was we're all Labour MPs in Scotland but yet all Tory MPs over in Westminster, so therefore it's another Tory government, right, under Margaret Thatcher. So, but now what's it look like? Well, now it's all SNP instead of all Labour, right, or mostly SNP. So that's where we're at. And when it comes to the arguments from Labour and Tories in Westminster, well, I'll just leave you with the thoughts of Alex Salmond himself.
And politically irrelevant.